The moment I dropped the envelope, the party stopped cold. My name is Eric. I'm 34 years old and I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. That Saturday, I'd spent 6 hours mowing the lawn, setting up the grill, and even picked up a case of imported craft beer to make a good impression. My wife's family was over for a backyard cookout. All smiles, all fake. Madison's younger brother, Connor, the golden child, was holding court at the patio table, laughing a little too loud. I was standing at the grill when he said it. Funny how your kid doesn't look a damn thing like you, huh? He leaned back in his chair, his eyes flicking to Madison like he was waiting for a reaction. Madison didn't disappoint. She laughed, flicking her hair off her shoulder like she was in some shampoo commercial. Maybe Eric has some secrets, she said with a smirk, and everyone at the table burst out laughing. I didn't laugh. I set the tongs down on the grill, wiping my hands on my shorts. My heart was beating fast, my mouth dry, but I didn't let it show. I just walked over to the table, looked Connor dead in the eye, and said, "Then maybe we should all share secrets." The table went quiet. Madison's father, Dave, cleared his throat and tried to force a smile. "It's just a joke, Eric. Come on, lighten up." I shook my head slowly. No, I think we're past that now." I turned and walked into the house, straight down the hallway to the bedroom. My hands were shaking as I pulled open the bottom drawer of my dresser. There it was, the envelope, thick, white, with a single word written on the front in my careful handwriting: results. I'd had the DNA test done weeks ago, not because I doubted I was Aiden's father. Deep down, I'd always known. But the way they all looked at me, the way they laughed behind my back, I needed proof. I needed to know if I was crazy or if I was just the only one paying attention. I walked back outside, the envelope held tight in my hand. Madison looked up from her phone, her smile faltering when she saw me. "What's that?" she asked, her voice too light, too careful. I didn't answer. I just set the envelope down in the middle of the table, right on top of the checkered tablecloth stained with barbecue sauce and beer rings. It landed with a soft thunk that felt like the start of an avalanche. Connor's face lost its color. Madison's mother, Lydia, shifted in her seat, her hand tightening around her wine glass. Madison let out a nervous laugh. "Eric, come on. We're just messing around. Don't be so sensitive." I took a deep breath, my hands still trembling. "I'm not sensitive," I said, my voice low and steady. "I'm just done playing along." Dave looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Eric," he said, his voice calm but firm, "you're making a scene." I met his gaze. "No, Dave, I'm just telling the truth." I looked back at Madison, who was staring at the envelope like it was radioactive. "You wanted to joke about our son not looking like me," I said quietly. "So here's the truth. He's mine. I got the test done weeks ago. 99.99% match." Nobody moved. Connor's mouth opened like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. Madison swallowed hard. "Eric." I cut her off. "But that's not the part you should be worried about," I said, my voice cold and clear. "Maybe you should tell them about Brent." The name hung in the air like a slap. Lydia's eyes widened. Dave leaned back in his chair, his face pale. Madison's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at me like she didn't even know who I was. Connor stood up suddenly, knocking over his beer. "What the hell is he talking about?" I didn't answer. I just turned and walked back inside, the weight in my chest finally lifting, just a little. Behind me, the yard was silent. No laughter, no jokes, just the truth. Sitting in that envelope, waiting for someone else to pick it up. And for the first time in a long time, I felt I wasn't the one on trial. For the past 2 years, I'd bent over backwards trying to win over her people. When Madison said she wanted to be closer to her family, I took on a second job at the hardware store on weekends just to scrape together the down payment for a house near her folks. The day we closed on the place, Madison beamed like I'd given her the moon. But her family? They looked at me like I'd bought a ticket to a club I didn't belong in. From the beginning, everything about me seemed to rub them the wrong way. Her mother, Lydia, would tilt her head and smile sweetly, but her words were like little paper cuts. "Is Aiden getting enough protein? He looks a bit thin, don't you think?" She said it once while spooning potato salad onto her plate at a family dinner, and Madison didn't say a word. Her dad, Dave, would always find a way to turn the conversation back on me. Like that time we were moving furniture and I caught him smirking at Madison. He doesn't have your build, he said with a wink. Madison laughed like it was the most natural thing in the world. I laughed too, but my stomach turned. I kept telling myself it was just their way, old-fashioned, set in their ways, nothing personal. I thought maybe if I just worked a little harder, they'd see that I was good enough. I'd make little jokes, offer to help fix up their porch, bring over Madison's favorite bottle of wine when we visited, but every time I'd catch that little flicker in their eyes, like they were humoring me. Even in my own home, I felt like I was on trial. The worst part was Madison. I thought she'd have my back, but whenever Lydia would say something snide or Dave would give me that smirk, Madison would just smile and change the subject, like she didn't hear it, or worse, like she agreed. One night, about 6 months before that cookout, Madison and I were in the kitchen cleaning up after one of Lydia's endless Sunday dinners. I'd had a few beers and my frustration bubbled up. "Why don't you ever say something when they talk to me like that?" I asked her, my voice tight. She looked at me like I was being childish. "They're just being themselves," she said, rinsing a plate. "Don't be so sensitive, Eric." That phrase, "don't be so sensitive," stuck with me like a splinter. It played over and over in my head, even when I tried to let it go. Because deep down, I knew it wasn't just her family. It was Madison, too. She liked watching me squirm. She liked being the one who didn't have to take a side. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that I was paranoid. But the feeling only got stronger. Every family dinner, every sideways glance, every forced laugh Madison gave when Connor or Lydia said something cutting, it all piled up like bricks on my shoulders. Then one night, I was alone in our bedroom scrolling through my phone, and I saw something that stopped me cold. A text from some guy named Brent. Madison had deleted it a second after it popped up, but I'd seen enough. Just a couple of words, "miss you." I didn't say anything right away. I wanted to believe it was nothing. But it was like a piece of a puzzle sliding into place. All those little jokes, all those digs about him not looking like me, it wasn't just family chatter. It was something she'd let fester, something she'd let grow. That was when I realized the doubts had started long before Connor's crack at the cookout, long before I ever thought to get that DNA test. The truth was, I'd been the outsider in their perfect little world since day one. And Madison? She liked it that way. "He has green eyes? Odd," her cousin said at Easter, leaning back in her chair and tilting her head, a smile playing on her lips like she was talking about the weather instead of my kid. I was slicing up a ham at the kitchen island, and Madison just laughed. "Must get that from someone on your side," Lydia said, sipping her white wine with a look that was half innocent, half knowing. Nobody else said a word. I remember the way I forced a smile, pretending it didn't matter, but it stuck with me, deep down, like a splinter in my skin. Later that night, when we were driving home, I brought it up to Madison. "Does it bother you, all these little comments they make?" She shrugged like she didn't hear the edge in my voice. "They're just joking around," she said. "Don't be so sensitive." That phrase again, like a slap to the face. It wasn't just Easter. It was every holiday, every family gathering. They'd find a way to slip it in, little digs, little smiles, little ways of reminding me that in their minds, I didn't really belong. The worst part was that Madison never corrected them, never stood up for me. She'd just laugh along, sip her drink, and pretend it was all harmless fun. After a while, I started wondering if maybe she liked it, if maybe she liked the way it put me on edge, like it made her feel safer, knowing I was always the one chasing her approval. I told myself it was crazy, but the thought wouldn't go away. One night, about a month before the cookout, I was up late in our bedroom while Madison was in the shower. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A name I didn't recognize. Brent. My stomach twisted. I picked up the phone and watched as the message preview disappeared before I could read it. When Madison came out of the bathroom, hair wrapped in a towel, she didn't even notice I was holding her phone. "Who's Brent?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She froze for half a second, just long enough to confirm everything I'd been afraid of. Then she smiled that smile I'd come to hate. "Oh, he's just an old friend, from college." "Don't be ridiculous, Eric." I nodded, but my heart was pounding. I knew better than to push it. At least, I thought I did. But that night, while she slept, I went through her phone, deleted messages, half-finished conversations with that same name. Brent, the guy she dated right before me, the guy she always said was just a fling. I felt like I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just family teasing. It was an orchestrated effort to keep me off balance, to make me doubt everything. The next morning, she found me in the kitchen, staring out the window at the backyard. Aiden was playing with his trucks in the dirt, and all I could think was how I'd kill to protect him from this mess. Madison walked up behind me, slipped her arms around my waist. "Don't overthink things, Eric," she murmured against my back. "It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. I knew it then. The jokes about Aiden's eyes, the way her family never let up, the way Madison never defended me, it was all connected, and Brent was at the center of it. I didn't know what to do, so I let it fester. Let it eat at me while I smiled through every family dinner, every polite toast, every "we're just joking" moment, because I didn't want to believe that my wife, the mother of my son, could be playing me like this. But deep down, I knew the truth, and it was only a matter of time before it came out. One night, about 2 weeks before the cookout, I was giving Aiden a bath. He was splashing around in the tub, giggling, soap bubbles sticking to his hair. It was one of those rare moments when everything felt simple, like none of the whispers and the doubt could reach us here. Then he looked up at me with those big green eyes, so much like Madison's, and said, "You're not Daddy, you're Eric." My heart dropped into my stomach. "What do you mean, buddy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He just laughed and went back to playing with his toy boat. I sat there on the edge of the tub, feeling like the walls were closing in. It was probably nothing, just the way kids talk sometimes, but it felt like a sign, like the universe was trying to tell me something I didn't want to hear. The next morning, I took a long, hard look at myself in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, my jaw tight. I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I made a call to Midstate Diagnostics during my lunch break. Paid cash, didn't want anything showing on our joint accounts. The woman on the phone was polite, professional, didn't ask questions. She just gave me an appointment for the next morning. That night, I hardly slept. I kept thinking about all the little things, how Madison never corrected her family, how she never told me I was overthinking it, how she'd smile that smile whenever someone made a joke about Aiden. And then there was Brent, the name that kept popping up in my head like a warning bell I couldn't ignore. At the appointment, the nurse took the samples, Aiden's pacifier, a piece of my hair. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the little Ziploc bag with Aiden's pacifier inside. "You okay?" she asked me gently. I nodded, but I wasn't. When I walked out of there, I felt like I'd done something irreversible, like I'd crossed a line I couldn't come back from. But it wasn't about exposing Madison. It wasn't about hurting anyone. I just needed to know if I was crazy. The next few days were torture. Every time Madison smiled at me, every time Aiden called me Daddy, I felt like I was holding my breath. I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid, that this was all in my head. Then one afternoon, while I was at home alone, I found something that made everything real. I was cleaning out our old desktop computer, trying to back up files we never looked at anymore, when I found a folder I didn't recognize. Inside were messages between Madison and Brent, old ones from right before we got together. I scrolled through them, my hands shaking. Messages that should have been deleted, but somehow ended up in our cloud backup. Her telling him she missed him telling her she deserved better, her saying she didn't know what she wanted anymore. I felt like I was going to be sick. It wasn't just a fling. It was a plan. It was a safety net she kept in her back pocket, even after we'd started our life together. I closed the folder and shut the computer down. I didn't say anything to Madison that night. I just watched her, the way she laughed at Aiden's silly jokes, the way she brushed her hair out of her face. She looked like the same woman I married, but I didn't recognize her anymore. I kept the secret to myself while I waited for the results. Because even though I felt like my whole world was coming apart, I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Not until I had proof. 2 weeks later, the results came in the mail. I opened the envelope alone, sitting at the kitchen table with the morning light coming in through the window. My hands were shaking as I read the line that said it all. 99% match. Aiden was mine. Mine. I should have felt relief, and part of me did. But there was no celebration, no fist pump in the air, just this hollow feeling like I'd been holding my breath for so long and finally let it out, only to find nothing waiting on the other side. I thought about Madison's family, about Connor's jokes, Lydia's digs, Dave's smirks, about how Madison never once told them to stop. They'd been laughing at me for years, and I'd let it happen because I thought maybe if I just kept my head down, they'd see me as part of their picture-perfect family. But they never would. And Madison, she was the one who handed them the paintbrush. I took a long breath and printed a second copy of the test results. I slipped it into a plain white envelope and tucked it under my gym gear in the closet, my own private insurance policy. Not to confront her, not yet, but to wait for the moment when I'd need it. That moment came faster than I expected. The day of the cookout, I hadn't planned on dropping that bomb. I was out back, flipping burgers and trying to pretend everything was fine. Madison was holding court at the picnic table, laughing with her brother like nothing had ever gone wrong. I kept telling myself I'd hold on to the results for a while longer, wait for the right time to have that talk with her in private. But then Connor opened his mouth. "Funny how your kid doesn't look a damn thing like you, huh?" he said, his voice carrying across the yard like he was announcing the weather. Madison's eyes flicked to mine, and for a second, just a second, I thought I saw guilt there. But then she laughed, that same easy laugh she'd used 100 times before. "Maybe Eric has some secrets," she said, and I felt something in me snap. I wiped my hands on a napkin, walked into the house, and pulled the envelope from its hiding place. My palms were sweating, my heart pounding, but I wasn't scared anymore. I was done being the quiet one. When I came back outside and dropped that envelope on the table, the world seemed to stop. Nobody said a word. Madison's smile froze on her face, like she didn't know what to do now that the script had been thrown away. Her dad finally spoke up, his voice low and unsure. "What's that supposed to be?" I didn't look at him. I looked at Madison. "Why don't you ask your daughter? Or better yet, ask Brent?" Madison's face cracked then, not with confusion, but with guilt. I saw it all in that moment. Every lie, every excuse, every time she let her family pick me apart because it was easier than standing up for me. I turned to Connor, my voice flat and calm. "Since you're so worried about whether Aiden's mine, maybe you should know he is. And maybe you should ask yourself if your nephew is yours." The silence was like a slap, stretching out longer than I'd ever heard in that backyard. Madison's father looked at me like he didn't know who I was anymore. But for the first time, I wasn't the one on the defensive. The truth was out there, and I was done letting them write the story. After I dropped that envelope on the table, everything went dead quiet. 10 seconds, maybe more. It felt like the world had stopped turning. Madison's dad, Dave, was the first to break the silence. He cleared his throat, his eyes flicking from me to Madison and back again. "What's that supposed to be?" he asked, his voice careful, like he was trying to keep a grip on the moment. I didn't answer him. I kept my eyes on Madison. Her face had cracked open, not surprise, not confusion, but something worse. Guilt. I could see it in the way her shoulders hunched, the way her fingers twisted together in her lap. She didn't even try to play it off. She just stared at the envelope like it was something that might bite her. Connor leaned back in his chair, his smirk gone. "Eric, man, what's going on here?" he asked, his tone a lot less cocky now. I turned to him, feeling that cold calm settle in my chest. "Since you're so concerned about whether Aiden's mine, maybe you should know he is," I said quietly. "I've got the proof right there. So if you're going to joke about someone's kid not looking like them, maybe you should make sure it's not your own nephew you're talking about." Connor's face went pale. Lydia's hand shot to her mouth like she was about to be sick. And Madison, she just closed her eyes for a second like she was bracing for the punch. But she didn't say a word. Dave's face hardened. He turned to Madison. "Madison, what's he talking about? Who's Brent?" His voice was low, tight with something that sounded like disbelief and anger all rolled into one. Madison swallowed hard, but her mouth was still moving without sound. Finally, she managed, It's not what you think, Dad." But the words were shaky, and even she didn't look like she believed them. That's when Dave stood up. "That's enough, Madison," he said, his voice low, but with a finality that shut down the rest of the table. "This family's been laughing at Eric for too long, and you let it happen. You didn't just let it happen. You fed it. Enough." The whole yard went quiet. No more forced laughter. No more clinking of beer bottles. Just the hot summer air and the sound of the kids playing on the other side of the fence, oblivious to the truth tearing through the party. Madison finally looked at me then, her eyes wet but her expression defiant. "So what now?" she asked, her voice tight. "You're just going to throw everything away over this?" I laughed, a short, bitter laugh that didn't even sound like me. "I'm not throwing anything away, Madison. I'm just done pretending I don't see it." For a long moment, nobody said a word. Then Connor stood up, knocking his chair back with a clatter. "Man, I didn't know," he said, his voice cracking. "I was just messing around. I didn't know it was like that. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The truth was already out there. And for once, I didn't have to be the one carrying it alone." As I turned and walked back into the house, I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. I wasn't the one who needed to prove I belonged anymore. I wasn't the one on the defensive. I'd spent years letting them tear me down with a smile on their faces, and now they could deal with the fallout. That night, we didn't talk. After everyone had left, Connor and Lydia with hurried excuses, Dave with a disappointed look in his eyes, Madison locked herself in the bathroom. I packed a bag and slept in my truck, the stale smell of sweat and motor oil feeling more honest than the perfumed air of our bedroom. In the morning, she was sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of cold coffee clutched in her hands. She didn't look at me, when I walked in. "So what? Now you're the victim?" she asked, her voice flat. I laughed, a cold, humorless laugh that sounded like someone else's. "No, I'm just the idiot who trusted you." She didn't say anything, just stared down at the coffee like she was waiting for it to give her an answer. "I want a separation," I said, my voice calm, even though my heart was pounding. She looked up at me then, her eyes wide and wet. "You're really going to walk away from all of this over a stupid DNA test?" I shook my head. "It's not about the test. It's about all the little ways you chipped away at me, how you let them treat me like I was never enough, how you fed their doubts because it was easier than standing up for me." She blinked, and for a moment, I thought she was going to argue, to try to twist it around like she always did. But she didn't. She just whispered, "I'm sorry." The tears came fast, but so did my resolve. "I don't care," I said. "I've been played long enough." I went upstairs and started sorting through my clothes, packing what I'd need for a few nights. She followed me up, her footsteps light like she was scared to make any noise. "Eric, please, you're overreacting," she said, her voice cracking. It was just family teasing. It didn't mean anything. I zipped the bag shut and turned to face her. "No, Madison, it meant everything. Because you never once told them to stop. You never once stood up for me." She wiped at her face, smudging her mascara. "Where are you going to go?" "I'll figure it out," I said. "I'm not your problem anymore." I walked out of the bedroom, the house suddenly feeling smaller, emptier. On my way out, I stopped at the kitchen counter to grab my keys, and that's when I saw the notification on our shared bank app. A transfer. $3,700 to someone called Brent LLC. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What the hell is this?" I asked, turning to her. She froze, her lips parting in shock. It's nothing," she stammered. $3,700 isn't nothing," I said, my voice cold and calm. "What did you send him, Madison?" She didn't answer, just looked down at the floor like a kid who'd been caught red-handed. "He needed help," she finally whispered. "He was struggling, and I just wanted to help him get back on his feet." I felt the rage boiling in my chest. "So you were sending money to your ex behind my back," I said quietly, "while your family was treating me like I was nothing, while I was breaking my back to make this life for us." She flinched, but I didn't care. I was done being the one who got walked all over. I grabbed my bag and walked out, the door slamming shut behind me. The last thing I heard was her muffled sobs echoing through the house. In the driveway, I stopped and looked back at the house. Our house, the one I'd worked 2 jobs to buy, the one I'd thought would make me part of her family. I realized then that I'd never really belonged there. And for the first time in years, I was okay with that. Aiden stayed with me 3 nights a week. The first few times he slept over in my new place, a tiny apartment over a coffee shop downtown, he clung to me like he was scared I'd vanish in the middle of the night. I didn't blame him. I felt the same way. Those early days were a blur of early mornings and burnt waffles. I'd wake up to the sound of his giggles as he crawled into my bed at 6 in the morning, his little body warm and trusting against mine. I was exhausted, but I'd never felt more alive. The apartment was small, but it felt like home in a way the house with Madison never did. No judging eyes, no icy silences, just me and Aiden and the sound of the coffee shop's clinking cups below us. My lawyer drafted the joint custody papers. I made sure Aiden was taken care of, but I didn't let Madison off the hook for child support either. For once, I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. I was just being Aiden's dad. A few weeks later, I sold my share of Madison's family's landscaping business, the one I'd worked my ass off for while they treated me like I was an outsider. I took the cash and invested it in something of my own, a small landscaping company with 3 guys I knew from high school. Hard work, but honest work. Work that didn't require me to beg anyone for respect. At daycare drop-offs, I stopped introducing myself as Madison's husband. Now I was just Aiden's dad. That was enough for me. One Friday afternoon, I ran into Madison at the grocery store. She was standing in the produce aisle, reaching for a bunch of kale like nothing had changed. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes went wide. But she didn't say a word. She just looked right through me like I was a stranger. Aiden spotted her first. He was in the shopping cart, gripping a box of fruit snacks in his chubby little hands. "Mama!" he shouted, his face lighting up. Madison turned to him with a small smile, but her eyes flicked back to me, and something in her expression hardened. She walked over, but Aiden didn't reach for her. He reached for me. I saw the flicker of pain in her eyes, but I didn't feel sorry. Not anymore. Later that night, Aiden fell asleep in my lap while I read to him from an old Dr. Seuss book. His little head was heavy on my chest, his breath soft and even. I looked down at him and thought about all the times Madison's family said he didn't look like me. All the times they tried to make me doubt my place. None of that mattered anymore. Because the way Aiden clung to me when he was scared, the way he looked at me like I was his whole world, that was the only proof I needed. Life didn't get simpler. Bills still piled up. My landscaping company was a lot of work, more than I'd expected. But every time I felt like I was drowning, I'd think about Aiden's green eyes looking up at me, trusting me, loving me, and I'd remember why I was doing it. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just living my life. And it was enough. 6 months later, Madison called me. She said she wanted to have a family discussion at her parents' place. At first, I almost laughed, like it was a business meeting. But curiosity got the better of me, so I went. When I got there, the whole family was gathered around the dining room table, like it was Thanksgiving or something. Madison sat at the head of the table, her face carefully blank. Lydia was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, and Dave sat there stone-faced, his hands folded like he was about to deliver a sermon. Connor was there too, fidgeting with his phone, not meeting my eyes. I didn't care. I wasn't there for them. Madison started talking first. Her voice was calm, rehearsed, like she'd been practicing in front of the mirror. She said, "I know things have been hard, but we were wondering, for Aiden's sake, if maybe we could try again." I almost laughed, but I didn't. I just looked around the table, at the people who had spent years treating me like an outsider, like a joke, and I felt nothing. Instead of answering, I pulled an envelope out of my jacket and set it on the table. Plain white, just like the one I'd dropped at the cookout. Madison's eyes narrowed as she reached for it, her hands shaking. She opened it and scanned the first page. Her lips parted in shock. "What is this?" she asked, her voice cracking. "It's a custody proposal," I said evenly. "Joint custody for Aiden, clear terms for support, and a buyout for your half of the house. I've already signed it." Lydia let out a soft sob. "Eric, honey, can't we just—" "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You wanted answers in front of everyone. So here it is. I'm done. I don't want to keep fighting. I just want what's fair for Aiden." Connor finally looked up at me, his mouth opening like he wanted to say something. "I was out of line," he mumbled. "At the cookout, I'm sorry, man." I nodded once. I know. I didn't need more than that. For the first time in years, I was standing in that house and I wasn't the one apologizing. Madison's face was pale, her fingers white-knuckling the edge of the paper. "So this is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. Yeah, this is it. I stood up, feeling their eyes on me as I walked out the door. The sun was bright outside, the air cool against my face. And as I stepped off that porch, I realized something. I didn't owe them anything anymore. Not my time, not my money, not my silence. I'd come full circle, just like at the cookout. Only this time there was no laughter, no fake smiles, no doubt in my mind. This was my closure. My life on my terms. On Aiden's third birthday, I threw a small party in my backyard. No drama. No guilt trips, just me, my sister Jenny and her kids, a couple of buddies from the landscaping crew, and Aiden, the real star of the day. We didn't have fancy catering or a bouncy castle, just hot dogs on the grill, a bubble machine from the dollar store, and Aiden running around in a paper crown I'd let him pick out himself. The look on his face when he saw the cake, a simple chocolate one with toy trucks on top, was worth every second of the last few years of pain. As the candles flickered, Aiden climbed onto my lap, his arms wrapped tight around my neck. "Best day ever, Daddy," he whispered, his voice muffled against my shoulder. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yeah, buddy," I said softly, pressing a kiss to his hair. "Best day ever." I looked around the yard. My yard now. My life. My rules. Jenny was helping her youngest with a juice box, the guys were joking around by the grill, and nobody was looking at me like I didn't belong. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. Not to Madison. Not to her family. Just to myself. And to Aiden. Later, when the cake was cut and Aiden was sticky with frosting, I carried him inside and gave him a bath. He splashed and laughed, water going everywhere, and I didn't care about the mess. When he was done, I wrapped him in a towel and held him close. He looked up at me with those big green eyes, the same ones Madison's family used to say didn't match mine, and all I saw was my son, my family. The real win wasn't showing them all that they were wrong. It wasn't the DNA test or the custody papers. It was this. Aiden clinging to me, safe and loved, because I never stopped showing up. I saw Madison once more, a few weeks later, at the grocery store. She walked right past me like I was invisible, but Aiden didn't. He spotted me in the bread aisle and ran straight into my arms, giggling as I swung him up. She saw it, and I saw the look in her eyes, the one that said she knew she'd lost something she'd never get back. And in that moment, I realized I didn't need to prove I was Aiden's dad. I'd always been his dad. The test just confirmed what I already knew. So I let Madison walk on by. Let her keep her perfect little world of half-truths and polite smiles. I didn't need it. I had everything I needed in that boy's laughter, in the quiet moments at bedtime, in the way he called me daddy without hesitation. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was real. And it was mine.